Coming out with a name could take 12 days.
We are cool. Our music's cool. The damn band name better not be stupid. I think we ought to be called Chesty Puller.
The song is so dated. The song is so dated.
What happens when four rock legends share one stage and their egos are louder than the amps? One night, one gig, one supergroup that imploded in real time. Stay with me, because this wasn't just a bad show. It was the most awkward meltdown rock history tried to forget. David Bowie stood at the side of the stage with a half smile that barely hid the tension in his jaw, watching the crowd churn with impatience, unaware that what they were about to witness would become one of rock's most awkward implosions. The idea had sounded invincible on paper, a glittering collision of titans. A supergroup stitched together from legends whose names alone could sell out arenas before a single rehearsal note was played. Bowie had agreed because curiosity was his oxytocin, because risk thrilled him more than safety ever could, and because the promise of creative combustion felt irresistible. Alongside him were musicians who had each carved their own mythology into rock history. Men accustomed to control, to command, to being the gravitational center of every room they entered. In interviews, they called it destiny, a meeting of restless minds. In private, it felt more like a silent duel disguised as collaboration. Rehearsals began with laughter and expensive wine, but beneath the polite toasts lurked the sharp edges of ego. Every riff carried a territorial claim. Every lyric suggestion came wrapped in diplomacy that barely masked rivalry. Bowie noticed, at first, in the small pauses, the way conversations froze for a heartbeat too long after someone offered an idea. The drummer wanted thunder, relentless and bruising. The guitarist wanted space, long cinematic stretches that framed his virtuosity. The bassist guarded groove like a jealous monarch. Bowie wanted tension and release, drama and elegance, something theatrical enough to justify the hype. No one wanted to bend first? Still, the press machine roared ahead, christening them the future of rock before they had even agreed on a set list. Posters screamed their names in colossal fonts. Ticket sales exploded. The narrative became too big to escape. Backstage, on the night of the gig, the air felt electric, but brittle, like a storm threatening to crack the sky open. Bowie adjusted his jacket, immaculate, as always. But his eyes flicked toward the others, searching for alignment that never quite arrived. The opening chord rang out, slightly sharper than planned. A small thing, almost invisible to the audience, but on stage, it felt like a crack in glass. They pushed forward. The second song unraveled when the guitarist extended a solo far beyond rehearsal length, chasing applause while the rhythm section exchanged tight glances. Bowie stepped toward the mic to regain control, voice slicing through the chaos with practiced precision, yet the structure had already begun to wobble. He improvised a bridge to pull them back together, but the drummer shifted tempo in subtle rebellion, accelerating the pulse as if daring anyone to stop him. The crowd sensed friction and mistook it for raw intensity, cheering louder as the band's internal misalignment deepened. Between songs, Bowie attempted a joke, something light to recalibrate the mood, but it landed flat among his bandmates who stared ahead with rigid expressions. The next track was meant to be their grand statement, a new anthem forged from their combined firepower. Instead, it became a battlefield. Harmonies clashed in awkward dissonance. The bassist turned up his amp, mid-song, swallowing nuance in a wall of low-end dominance. Bowie felt the performance slipping into spectacle for all the wrong reasons. He could taste the metallic temps of disappointment even as the audience roared. Sweat traced lines down his temples, not from exertion but from the strain of holding together a fragile alliance. Midway through the set, the guitarist abruptly switched to a different key during a transition, a move that forced Bowie to pivot, vocally in real time. It was impressive, almost heroic, yet undeniably hostile. The drummer responded with a fill so aggressive it bordered on parody. What should have been synergy felt like sabotage. Backstage crew members exchanged worried looks. Managers hovered near the wings, calculating damage control. Bowie locked eyes with the bassist during a breakdown section and saw the truth reflected back at him. This was not unity. It was competition amplified. When the encore arrived, the band barely consulted one another before launching into a supposed crowd favorite. The intro fell apart within seconds. Timing drifted, cues were missed. Bowie stepped forward, charisma blazing, and tried to carry the wreckage with sheer presence, but even he could not disguise the fractures splitting the music apart. The applause at the end was loud, yet confused. A standing ovation wrapped around bewilderment. As they took their bow, there was no arms slung over shoulders, no shared grin of triumph, just stiff nods and quick exes. Backstage, the silence was heavier than any argument. No one exploded. No one needed to. The gig had spoken for them. Part 2. David Bowie removed his jacket slowly in the dressing room, folding it with ritual. Precision, as if order in fabric could compensate for chaos in sound. Around him, the supergroup disintegrated not with shouting but with chilling civility. The guitarist insisted the audience loved the extended solos, citing the volume of applause as proof that spontaneity was the soul of rock. The drummer countered that discipline had been sacrificed for vanity. The bassist remained guarded, speaking only to defend the integrity of his tone and accusing the others of crowding the mix. Bowie listened more than he spoke, absorbing the collision of perspectives like a scientist observing a volatile experiment. He understood something the others resisted admitting. Brilliance does not automatically blend. Greatness multiplied can become instability rather than strength. Managers entered with forced optimism, suggesting minor tweaks for the next show, framing the meltdown as rough-edged authenticity. But Bowie sensed the fracture was structural, not cosmetic. It was not about tempo, or keys, or solos. It was about identity. Each man had built a career on singular vision. In this project, singular visions collided without surrender. The press reviews the next morning sliced through illusion with merciless eloquence. Critics described dazzling talent, shackled by ego. They praised moments of individual virtuosity while lamenting the absence of cohesion. Headlines used words like strained and disjointed and combustible. Fans debated online whether they had witnessed genius too raw for comprehension or simply a mess disguised as ambition. The truth lived somewhere uncomfortably in between. Bowie proposed a private meeting without entourages, without producers, without the intoxicating noise of expectation. In that quiet room, he spoke softly but directly, suggesting they strip everything back to basics. Rehearsed without cameras, rebuild trust, note by note. The guitarist bristled at the implication that he needed restraint. The drummer questioned whether compromise would dilute the very fire that made them iconic. The bassist warned against turning the project into a democracy that erased leadership. Bowie realized then that they were not arguing about music, but about hierarchy. No one wanted to orbit another star. Days passed with tense rehearsals that felt more like negotiations. Attempts at new material stalled when disagreements surfaced within minutes. Even when they managed to complete a song, it felt calculated, cautious, devoid of the reckless magic that had inspired the collaboration in the first place. The label began to worry about financial fallout. Rumors leaked about backstage tension. Invitations for television performances were quietly postponed. Bowie, ever attuned to narrative, understood that the story was shifting from triumphant alliance to cautionary tale. The final straw arrived during a smaller follow-up gig meant to redeem the first disaster. Determined to prove critics wrong, they over-rehearsed, sanding away spontaneity in pursuit of precision. The result was technically tighter, yet emotionally hollow mid-set. The guitarist forgot a cue and glared at the drummer as if blame could be reassigned mid-chord. The audience sensed restraint where there should have been freedom. Applause came politely, not passionately. Backstage afterward, the unspoken verdict crystallized. This was not evolution, it was erosion. Bowie broke the silence, with unexpected calm, acknowledging the experiment had been bold but misaligned. He framed the ending, not as failure, but as clarity, suggesting that sometimes chemistry is explosive only in theory. The others hesitated, pride wrestling with relief, before conceding that the weight of their individual legacies made true collaboration nearly impossible. Contracts were quietly dissolved. Statements were crafted with diplomatic language about scheduling conflicts and creative directions. Publicly, the supergroup faded with minimal drama. Privately, it left a bruise on every participant's confidence. For Bowie, the experience became another chapter in his lifelong study of reinvention. He did not retreat from collaboration but approached it differently, seeking partners willing to risk ego for connection. The awkward gig became legend among fans, whispered about as the Night Titan stumbled. Yet in retrospect, it offered a rare glimpse behind the curtain of myth. It revealed that even icons can miscalculate, that star power does not guarantee harmony, that art demands vulnerability more than dominance. Years later, when asked about the project, Bowie would smile with that familiar, enigmatic warmth and describe it as a beautiful misfire, a reminder that music is not built on reputation but on listening. David Bowie stepped into the corridor outside the dressing room with a stillness that contrasted violently with the storm circling the project. His expression unreadable, yet his mind racing with the cold clarity that follows public disaster. The first gig had been awkward, the second restrained. But this third meeting behind closed doors would determine whether the supergroup had any pulse left at all. He watched the others drift in separately, no longer laughing, no longer posturing. 4 cameras, each man carrying the invisible weight of reputation, like armor, that had suddenly grown too heavy to wear. The guitarist avoided eye contact, fingers twitching as if still searching for fretboard dominance. The drummer tapped restless rhythms on the table, impatience radiating from every movement. The bassist leaned back with guarded detachment, jaw set in stubborn pride. Bowie broke the silence, not with accusation, but with observation. Describing the chemistry as volatile, brilliant in fragments yet fractured as a whole. He spoke about listening, about space, about the subtle surrender required when legends share a stage. His tone was calm yet piercing, forcing them to confront what applause could not disguise. The guitarist defended his improvisations as necessary electricity, insisting the crowd wanted spectacle. The drummer argued that unpredictability without structure was indulgence. The bassist countered that neither of them respected the foundation. That held the music upright. It was not a shouting match, but a slow unraveling of trust, a realization that every compromise felt like a personal diminishment. Bowie suggested a radical reset, a stripped rehearsal with no solos extended, no flourishes, just for musicians in a room chasing a single unified sound. They agreed reluctantly, perhaps out of curiosity, perhaps out of fear of becoming a punchline in rock history. The rehearsal began in near silence, instruments tuned with clinical precision. The first song unfolded cautiously, each player holding back, as if daring the others to overstep. For a fleeting moment, it worked. The groove locked in, the chords shimmered. Bowie's voice threaded through the arrangement with haunting control. There was a glance exchanged, almost hopeful, almost triumphant, but then instinct took over. The guitarist pushed a solo longer than agreed, subtle at first, then undeniably territorial. The drummer answered with fills that demanded attention. The bassist thickened the low end until the mix felt crowded. Bowie felt the fragile unity crack again, this time without the adrenaline of a live audience to mask it. He stopped singing mid-line, lowered the microphone, and let the music collapse into uncomfortable silence. That silence said more than any argument could. It revealed that talent was not the issue. Respect was. Days later, the label requested a decision. Investors wanted certainty, promoters wanted reassurance, fans wanted myths to match expectation. Bowie gathered the band one final time, not in a studio but in a quiet lounge, where the absence of instruments forced honesty. He spoke about legacy, about how greatness is measured not just by volume but by vulnerability. He admitted his own miscalculations, acknowledging that assembling giants does not guarantee harmony. He asked each of them whether they truly desired collaboration or merely the validation of another headline. The question lingered like smoke. One by one, they conceded fragments of truth. The guitarist confessed he struggled to share spotlight. After decades of command, the drummer admitted he feared becoming background rather than backbone. The bassist revealed he guarded control because unpredictability threatened his sense of stability. In that rare moment of candor, the supergroup almost felt human rather than heroic. Yet awareness did not equal transformation. When the possibility of another tour was raised, hesitation overshadowed enthusiasm. Bowie recognized the difference between potential and reality. He knew when to evolve and when to exit. With measured grace, he proposed dissolving the project before resentment calcified into bitterness. There was resistance, pride flaring briefly, but beneath it lay relief. Contracts were reviewed, clauses activated, public statements drafted, with polished diplomacy about creative divergence and future The announcement landed with a mixture of shock and inevitability. Media outlets dissected every rumor, replayed clips of the awkward gig, analyzed body language for hidden clues. Fans split into camps, some mourning lost potential, others relieved. The experiment had ended before further damage. Bowie retreated, not into silence, but into reinvention, channeling the lessons into future collaborations built on mutual risk rather than mutual status. The others returned to their respective domains, where control felt familiar and applause unambiguous. Over time, the supergroup became legend, not for chart-topping hits, but for the cautionary narrative it embodied. Documentaries referenced the implosion as proof that chemistry cannot be manufactured by fame alone. Musicians cited it in interviews as a reminder that humility is as essential as virtuosity. Bowie, ever the architect of narrative, reframed the failure as artistic research, a necessary misfire in a career defined by fearless experimentation. In private conversations, he admitted the gig had stung, that standing on stage amid dissonance felt like watching a dream distort in real time. Yet he also acknowledged the strange beauty of the attempt, the audacity of believing that for towering egos could fuse into something transcendent. The final memory he carried was not the off-key transitions or the tense glances, but the brief rehearsal moment when everything aligned for a heartbeat, when the music felt weightless and possibility infinite. That fleeting harmony proved the idea had not been foolish, only fragile. In the end, one gig did not destroy reputations, but it stripped away illusion. It exposed the myths that greatness stacks neatly, that icons automatically amplify one another. It revealed that collaboration demands surrender, that even legends struggled to offer. And as the years passed, the story endured not as mockery, but as mythic caution. A tale told in backstage whispers about ambition, ego, and the razor-thin line between explosive genius and spectacular collapse.